Let's talk about the summary from down to earth from 16 to 31st May. Now, the first is the Himalayan Heatwave. It is believed that since 2022, we have seen one of the warmest March in 122 year, and that was this year. It has significantly affected the wheat production in the country, through which we have seen the shriveled grains, and we have covered this in a separate lecture in a different class. Now coming on to the impact. Now impact had been very severe. We have seen impacts even till the region of Ladakh. So Ladakh has received a heat wave this time. There is another thing which is on the Oasis. So one of the conservationists from Rajasthan in the Dholia village in Pokhran block has said that he actually has a great interest for conserving the wildlife. So he has started up creating ponds, and the ponds which have been dried up have now been brought with water, and these are now sources of water for the various species like fox, cat, antelope, chinkara, and so on. The virus is spillover. Now another important study, China has reported the first case of human infection through the bird flu H1093. And this is another important study that we need to understand. The trends for such kinds of transmissions in the future are highly likely. Now, we have seen a 4-year boy who got infected through the chickens and the crows which were raised near his home in China, and this was the first human infection of H3N9 influenza. The next is blue carbon market. This is gaining traction in the countries which are trying to focus on net zero emission by 2050. So, what is blue carbon? Extremely important question. It is a carbon which is sequestrated and stored by the coastal ecosystems. And what would it include? It would include the marshes and the tidal areas and the mangrove areas. Now, which of the regions, for example, California and Bahamas, are the two important areas which have been part of it. Other important countries who are aiming to reduce the emissions include Seychelles, Indonesia, Kenya, and United Kingdom. Indonesia has brought the biggest ban, which is the ban on the export of palm oil. Indonesia is one of the biggest producers of palm oil, and so far it has said that Indonesia would be banning the export for few weeks, but within that few weeks the prices have jumped in the international market 4 to 6%. Both Indonesia and Ukraine's cut off from the world. So Ukraine for the wheat, Indonesia for the oil, has brought terrible problem, and world's largest importers are now relying on other countries, focusing on other nations to get some kind of help. The next is industrial pollution. The Beachari village in Udaipur, which is close to Hindustan Zinc plant, is where there were 5 units which have been started by O.P. Agrawal, and those were the units which are basically the various chemical factories producing H acid, crystalline compound, and dye intermediate. Now this region has witnessed yellow cocktail or iron gypsum and pollutants in the water, and as a result water tankers are being brought, but there is lot of hoarding for the water which has been witnessed. Now if we talk about the timeline, it was in 87 that this started. In 88 there were leaders talking about protest for the same. Then there was one of the activists, Mr. Dangi, who filed a case against Agarwal in the sub-district magistrate level, and later on there was a petition in Supreme Court with the lawyer MC Mehta. Later on the Sansthan, which is the Paryavaran Evam Manav Vikas Sansthan, has taken into account the area which is being affected. So the Agrawal and corporation went for civil suit in the High Court. The residents filed another complaint for the effluents which are being discharged by Hindustan Zinc refinery, and finally there was a huge fine with a compound interest of 12% which was imposed. This amount has been a significant amount in the region which is being imposed on the implications to the environment. The next is the Stockholm Syndrome. The 50th anniversary celebration of the Stockholm Conference is about common future, not about division of the past. So the idea in 68 started with the Stockholm Conference, and Indira Gandhi said that poverty is the biggest polluter during that time. The rich countries have seen the hole in the ozone, and its impact has been seen not only by the rich nations but the globe around. So it's focusing on our common future and not about the divisions that had been in the past. So in 72 there were 26 principles forefront for the environmental concerns which were laid down. Some of the key principles include the natural resources, the discharge of toxic substances, the steps to prevent the pollution, the environmental policies, the various pursuits which have been done as the charter. And now we talk about Stockholm plus 50, that is how next 50 years would be treated with emergency applications. So what are the steps that need to be taken into account? There has been inclusive wealth report of 2018 that says that the capital grew at around 3.8%, the health and the education induced human capital grew at around 2.1%. so these are the factors that have been taken into account, which is unite for the future, warming oceans, health and governance, polar protection, local power, and the progress measures. So human wealth, skills, infrastructure, and sustainable development are important. Focusing on polar app, there has been melting of Antarctic ice, which has been significantly massive, and how that has affected the region, the oceans, how they are affected. So IPCC has talked about marine heat waves, which are likely to become 4 times more frequent by 2080 as compared to the recent phenomena. The acidity in the acidification of the oceans is increasing, the pH is changing, and these have been a major risk to the marine atmosphere. There has been inequitable distribution of the facilities for the marine ecosystem. Decentralization of power is again important at the local and the self-sustaining level. How do we securitize the pandemic? So One Health is one of the collaborative efforts where we talk about the global, national, and international efforts to have best health for animal, plants, population, and the environment. So this One Health approach is an approach of preparedness, unity, and pandemic prevention, incentivizing the establishments, building One Health capacity, and a holistic structure is important. Event 201 is important, and this was hosted by John Hopkins Center for Health Security. Now it has been believed that the zoonotic coronavirus was transmitted from bats to pigs and finally to human beings. There have been various recommendations. Now these recommendations focuses on vaccination, therapeutics, diagnostics, focusing on the severity of the pandemic, how to reduce the economic impact of the pandemic and the epidemic, and prioritizing the various methods to combat any kind of misinformation or incorrect information. So science for just solution is again important. What are the negotiations and the steps that can be done? India and South Africa in 2020 sought for a temporary waiver on World Trade Organization on IP rights, which is the trade related aspects of international property, intellectual property rights, and that focused on affordable vaccines and therapies should be made available to all, and there should not be any acute shortage of medical items. So we have been focusing on the problem solving approach, streamlining how government can override the patient rights. And if we focus on a country like India, 63% of the population are fully vaccinated, 7% have their booster shots, and 73% have at least one shot. We have seen that the exports in 2021 significantly have reduced as compared to what was promised. Now focusing on the poverty. Now World Bank has come up with a new definition. Previously it was $1.9 per day. If it is less than that, it would be considered as poor. However, they changed the definition to $2.15 per day in 2017, and that was an impact because with the new poverty line, the poverty has reduced to 9.1%, or in absolute terms nearly 15 million people have come out of the poverty line just because the baseline has been changed. Okay, the next is if we focus on the thresholds, we need to understand that there are two important things which have been affecting it. First is the food prices and the inflation for the food prices. Now as we understand, when the food prices increase, it's the poor that suffer the most. The rich households would still be spending a little more, but the poor would spend a significant proportion of their percentage of earnings onto the food and the basic necessities, which would cut the expenditure onto other required items. The next is Global Land Outlook report. Now 40% of the land around the world is degraded. Half of the humanity, 1/3 of the global economic output is affected, and over half of the global GDP in 2021 is affected. We need to understand what are the standards that need to be brought. So there has to be additional 69 gigatons of carbon emissions that would be released. Restoration of 15% of the degraded land in priority should be taken, and 60% of the species extinction and 300 gigatons of carbon has to be avoided for degradation purpose. There has been another initiative, Great Green Wall, which has however not been that successful. Costa Rica was able to recover 52% of the degraded forest. Congo is regenerating its degraded landscape in the coming areas. We are also rethinking for getting in a good system. When we say our global food systems are responsible for 80% deforestation, 70% of the freshwater use, and single largest cause of the loss of biodiversity in the region, we need to understand that ongoing methods of food production are highly destructive, and we need to focus on another innovative methods. So zero waste natural farming is one of those, and India's contribution to it has been important. Again, monoculture plantations are significantly harmful for the region. So preservation of biodiversity is important. Another National Biodiversity Authority, which advises for the conservation of biodiversity and equitable sharing of the benefits, has been important. The guidance, the support under this is again important. The next is the State Biodiversity Board, which is at the state level. The Biodiversity Management Committee, which prepares, validates the biodiversity registers with the local people. Nagoya Protocol, adopted in 2010, is a supplementary agreement, and it is being issued as access to biological resources and associated knowledge and benefit sharing regulations. Now this is one of the important methods that we would be taking into account for the further biological use and associated knowledge. So Nagoya Protocol we have covered in our class on 33 important environmental conventions, don't miss that. The next is Biological Diversity Amendment Bill. Now this was tabled in 2021, and the idea was to reduce the burden on the wild medicinal plants by bringing in more cultivation for them, bringing in more research and investment, making medicinal properties safe and secure, and bringing in more development. The Arogyapacha is a case which was important. Now this is the species which is found in Western Ghats. Is a small slender plant, and is considered as highly energetic even if consumed empty stomach. It was believed that one of the teams from CSIR, which is the regional research laboratory in Jammu, visited the Agastya Hill for documenting the plants in the region. Besides this, Shigella infections have been found because of food poisoning, and they are actually fatal for children under 5 years. We have also seen Bihar Forest Department, which has stopped the construction at the Ganga river front in the Bhagalpur area. Bhagalpur, as part of the Bhagalpur Smart City project, Ganga river is part of it. Also, China has established the world's highest weather stations on Mount Everest, which is at a height of 8830 meters above sea level. Tasmania is the only region to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and become first carbon negative country. This is one of the reports which was released by Griffith University. So those were some of the important topics that we have discussed in this edition of Down to Earth. Stay tuned for many updates from our side. Wish you a very good luck for your upcoming examinations.